Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Your Spiritual Journey. This is Dr. Bob, and this is the space and the place where we talk about things important to your soul. As always, I ask that if you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe, maybe leave a comment, like us, and if you're so inclined, support us on Patreon. So I just wanted to mention be,fore I introduce our guest that we've had quite a few people on this program related to the ARE, the Association for Research and Enlightenment. And you can find more about them on edgarcayce.org if you're interested. Our very first episode a couple years ago now was with Doug Knuven. He was on the ARE board at the time, and he's a holistic veterinarian. He's no longer on their board, but he still is an important figure in the growth of the ARE in this region, this Pittsburgh area. I've also interviewed Ed Foote, who goes around the country lecturing about Edgar Cayce. I've interviewed Ed West, who's been working with the ARE for a good bit of his life. Episode 121, which kicked off our 10th season here, was with Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer, who is frequently a guest lecturer at Virginia Beach, where the ARE is headquartered. I also did an interview, episode number 104, with PMH Atwater, who's very well known internationally for her research into near-death experiences. So all that being said, today's guest is Joan Gennarini. She was born in Colorado and raised in Indiana. Her parents were music teachers, and her mother later became a massage therapist. Joan's career in massage therapy started after a 15-year stint in corporate America. During that time, she moved across the country from California to Texas to Maryland, working for companies like Shell Oil, Enron North America, and Pacific Gas and Electric. After enduring years of long hours sitting in meetings and working with various personalities of coworkers, meeting stressful deadlines, and staring at the computer screen for many hours on end, she decided it was time to begin her healing journey. She was inspired by her mother's skill in massage therapy, so she broke away from that busy corporate lifestyle in September of 2003 and attended massage school full-time. That was at the Cayce Reilly School of Massotherapy in Virginia Beach, Virginia. After graduating in 2004, she began working for a popular day spa in Newark, Delaware, and in 2006 opened her own private clientele massage business, Rekindled Spirits Therapeutic Massage. And lucky for us, she moved to the Pittsburgh area, so we have her talents available locally. So Joan, the way we do this is I ask you to relate your spiritual journey from childhood until now. I'll ask you a few questions, and then we'll talk about massage therapy.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so basically, as a child, my mother's father, so my grandfather, Warren, he was a minister, Disciples of Christ. And so we did attend church. When we were out in Colorado, my mom and dad, and I'm not sure why the switch was made, but they became Lutherans. And my dad was very active in the church, and he did choir. And I was just a little tot then. We moved back to Indiana, to the Midwest, when I was about 4 or 5-ish. And we kind of bounced around between a Disciples of Christ church and a Lutheran church. just depending on what my mom felt was fulfilling her needs at the time and what was fulfilling us kids' needs at the time. And so mom and dad were pretty active in like the children's church, developing that so children didn't have to sit into an adult church. They could learn lessons in a children church and then also have the Sunday school. So I just grew up in a very positive environment with religion, and I want to stress that because I always feel like the way I was taught with Jesus and God, it was always just very loving and very kind, and they were always working with the animals. But as I grew up over my lifetime and had other people that I associated with, lots of times feel the face of God is angry or Jesus is angry or they have to go to church and ask for forgiveness all the time. I did not have that experience as a child. So I had a very warm, loving experience in the church. When I got into college, I tried to find a church, but you just kind of follow your own path. I didn't really get into campus ministries at all. And then when I became an employed person, my first job was out in the LA Basin, and then it was hard to find a church that felt comforting to me. And I think too, as you become exposed more outside of your traditional comfort of your home life, you start hearing other people's opinions and you start kind of living the real life. But it's always that spark in you, that's always that comfort of faith and spirituality. My mom, who started kind of wondering about her own spirituality, she was working in a library in Indiana at the time, the university library, and she came across Edgar Cayce books. And that really sparked her interest in a different type of spirituality than just going to a church and reading a Bible. And it also got her involved a little bit more with trying to understand about massage and therapeutic benefits for her. She had deteriorating discs in her back, and so she didn't want to have the surgery and the steel rods put in. So she was finding other alternative methods. So as I'm now in corporate America and very logical job, I think spirituality was kind of took the back burner for a while. And but my mom was doing her thing, and she started doing her massage, and she became a massage therapist, and then eventually opened a massage school. And again, I was just very focused on kind of the black and white of everyday logical world. And probably my spirituality was somewhat lacking then. I mean, I would go to church once in a while, but I didn't really understand all this astrology or all this spiritual or this Reiki. Didn't really know what any of that meant. And then eventually, I just got burnt out in corporate America. I mean, you spend a lot of hours. I'm sitting behind a computer yelling at people all day. Just wasn't really, my cup of tea. And then I think you never know how the universe does and why they do it, how the universe impacts you and why you're set up the way you are. But eventually I was laid off. And so I was able to take my severance and just kind of have a year off with some unemployment income and some severance money. And the guy I was dating at that time, I thought I would, move in with him and be with him, but he wanted me to have a job first. And so I called my mom. I said, tell me about this massage world. At this time, she had a massage school. I didn't think I could actually go to her school. She was in Colorado. I was living on the East Coast at the time. But she told me about this Edgar Cayce and this ARE, and I kind of rolled my eyes because I was like, oh, what is this about, Yeah. But as I started talking to the staff there, it just was a good fit for me. And for me, I kind of found myself. So when I say I found myself, you work so hard in your day-to-day life, but all of a sudden you start receiving massage therapy. They had classes like mind, body, and spirit, whatever that meant. They had classes on colon care. They had holistic remedies. And so you just get yourself immersed into this whole spiritual world. And I honestly thought it was going to be Bible readings, and I was very thankful it wasn't Bible readings. They do have Edgar Cayce's readings, but we were taught what that meant, and he had these visions, or he had these um, information coming through that helped the people that were coming seeking help from him. So anyway, bottom line is it helped cleanse me, probably kind of what I had. I was probably in my mid-30s then, so it helped cleanse out
Uh-huh.
some of that stuff that got stuck in me, whatever that stuff was. And then people were like, "Well, Joni, you just need to stay down here in Virginia Beach, and you just need to, work at the ARE." And I'm like, "You got to take this skill set and go back out into the world, you know?"
That's why you were there,
Yeah.
right?
So my husband Rob, who was my boyfriend at the time, he still allowed me to come back in with open arms, and honestly, I thought I was going to go back in corporate America, make real money because I had my year off. But I got into a day spa, and I had to learn how to touch people. I was always, writing on a piece of paper and
Hmm.
crunching numbers and kind of telling people what to do or being told what to do. So now I had to listen, and I had to not only listen with my ears and my mind, but my hands. Um, so I was in a really good spot to start with for that first couple of years. People were just coming in, the economy was good, people had money to spend, and I was just helping people to relax. And then just bounced around with different places. This was in Delaware, so different places in Delaware. Eventually was able to go out on my own. I did some mobile massages, but it was interesting. I had a reading too with Mary Roach and at the ARE, and she said it was basically a 7-year process. And I'm like, what? And so this was right when I got into massage school. But and I went back one day and listened to the tapes of the reading I had with her, and it was really about year 5, 6. I started understanding more about the spirituality, more information started coming to me, and then I really started able to kind of get my wheels underneath me.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's pretty interesting.
So tell me what that phrase means. Information started coming to me. Where did that come from? How did that appear?
That's a good question. And I think one of my first sessions was I very blessed the universe. They send me with people that I need to learn from. When I say send me people on my massage table.
Hmm.
And there was this gentleman who had an art school like like acting, okay, that kind of arts. And so he came in and he needed some, work done on him. And all of a sudden, I just started seeing things in my mind's eye. And I didn't know if that information was for me or if that information was for him. I had a little bit of Reiki training, we heard a little bit about that. But I got this very vivid picture of this old farmhouse and this lady out there on the porch in front of the picket fence thing, and she had this beautiful red dress on with white dots, and I mean I could just see her image still today. And I didn't know what to say to my client, but eventually, as we kind of finished up, my intuition said to say something, so I said something to him. He goes, "Today's my mom's birthday." And so she had crossed over. And so then I saw his dad during that session, I guess, out in the out in the barn doing some repair work. And so that started getting me a little bit more comfortable with what
Mm.
information was coming in. So I had a few more sessions with him coming in, but we would start, kind of understanding things. And I had another highly involved person that was spiritual. She was medical, but also spiritual. And so some information would come through. And when I say that information, it's just kind of seeing images or maybe some pictures, kind of like a movie camera.
Yeah.
And you never know if it's legit or not, but you just start kind of exploring it. So that's kind of how I
Yeah.
got into that world. So
Okay.
it doesn't happen with everybody, not every massage. It just happens with a
Yeah.
few people I say, like minds, so.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me, and I guess I say this from experience because my wife and I both have had chair massages from you.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and as I listen to you talk about this, that you're listening with your hands, not just with your ears,
Mm-hmm.
and listening with your heart, so that when when we experienced that massage from you, it was very obvious that it was more than just a physical sensation, that there was something going on through your hands. And I'm a Reiki practitioner, so I understand energy coming through your hands. And
I think if I reflect back on the Edgar Cayce school, and so the first 3 months we're learning technique, but we're getting a lot of things thrown at us, mind, body, and spirit, stuff like, so 3 days a week, you're pretty much learning technique and anatomy. And then 2 days you might have a mind, body, spirit class or a dreams class. And so you're kind of like, what? Because they're like two different worlds.
Yeah.
And then in January, a Reiki teacher was at the ARE, and my mom's business partner in her massage school was a Reiki master. And I did have one session with her before I came to this school, the massage school. And it piqued my interest, but I also was like, oh, I don't know. I'm not sure if I want to cross that line. But here I am. I have extra income from my severance. I'm kind of down there now, right? It's where I'm living. I have the time. I don't have to go to a job right now. I'm in between jobs. And so I delved into that. And I remember saying to the teacher, I'm like, what if we're not worthy? What if it doesn't come, to you, right? And she goes, you wouldn't be here if you weren't. I think maybe I said, what if I wasn't ready? I'm probably not worthy, but what if I wasn't ready, but I felt worthy in my mind? And she says, you wouldn't be here today if you weren't ready. And I was like, what? What does that mean? But as I was learning that Reiki, opening that up, and I was also now starting my practicums, I think that energetic energy probably started coming through as I was doing the actual massages. Because not everybody in my massage class took Reiki, and maybe it's just passed down through my mother, generations, I don't know. But I always tell people it comes from my heart. And if you start from that versus like, how much money am I going to make off this person? Or am I going to be paid my bills? Or, start judging the person. If you just open it up and allow the session be where it needs to be for that person and that individual. So.
Well, when my wife heard that I was interviewing you today, she said, I still remember that massage.
Aw.
And I still have it in my head for my schedule to get back to Joan and get another massage from her.
Aww.
So it's not a one and done thing. I mean, it's something that you remember and you take with you, and it becomes part of you.
Well, and what I tell people, some people will come off my massage table and they're like, okay, how often do I need to come? How many weeks, and I said, you know what, first of all, why don't you just, process it and just see how you feel. I said, you got my number. I said, some people will do it monthly. Some do it, every 6 to 8 weeks. Some I see them once a month, or maybe not once a month, once a year or once a quarter. Some people do come once a month, but I don't ever want to totally guide somebody because I feel like it needs to come from within. So my business name is Rekindled Spirits. I felt my spirit got rekindled in massage school. I try to help the people that I, associate with rekindle their spirits and whatever that means for them. And if you come from a place of heart, it just, for me, that's what's worked over time. So, yeah. And I think the Edgar Cayce school helped. I think, maybe as a little kid, I saw in church how it can be good and society can be good and helping your neighbors can be good and having the picnics. Like my grandfather used to take me on his calls back in the day when he would see like the elderly or the sick, like in people's homes. I don't really remember going to hospitals with him, but I do remember going to a couple of homes. And I mean, how many little kids are, exposed to that, of how you can help and be kind to your neighbors, My dad was a school teacher, so was my mom. They were always giving service, So
right.
I kind of grew up with that mentality.
Yeah.
So
locally, there is a Search for God study group, and I was curious to know if you joined that group and when that happened and how, what's that experience like?
Yeah, so I bounced back and forth with that. when I first got here was right before COVID, and we started it. And what you have to appreciate is everybody's got a lot of different people have different personalities. So there was a lot of different personalities showing up to that session, and not all of us kind of saw eye to eye. And then COVID hit, and then we kind of broke up for a little bit, and then we were like, oh, we'll do it via Zoom, and so we were trying to do it by Zoom. But there is one group now, and it might be the only group, but I think there was many more groups. But Beth Ehrlich and Joan Dickerson are leading that group, and I pretty much followed them for about a year with it. I really like your book there on my right. That book.
The contemporary Cayce book.
Yeah. When we were going through that connected with me a lot better than is this the original one?
Right. Yeah.
The original one, the text is harder to understand, I think, for me. And
it's kind of like reading the King James Bible instead of a new revised edition.
Yeah, the language is a little bit older, and then it's like you have to keep rereading sentences and paragraphs. So I connected a little bit better with the contemporary one, and then I just ended up, which is a good thing. I got a little bit busier because with COVID, we couldn't do a lot of massage hands-on, right? Can't really do massage over Zoom. You can do Reiki, long-distance Reiki, and you can do all that kind of stuff, but you can't really do the hands-on that well. I'm not saying it's impossible, but so I had more free time, so I joined their group, and I was spending time with them. And there was another group, Patty, who's in Delaware. She had some groups over there that I was other types of books, but spiritual learning, and so I was spending time doing that.
Yeah.
And then my clients picked up again, so I don't have the bandwidth to do as much. But no, I enjoyed it, and I think again, you got to remember sometimes you have strong personalities, but what's good about it is we can all speak what we think that means, and then we have to come back together and go, okay, well maybe this is kind of like a merged agreement of what it is, or maybe it's not, but healthy discussion and maybe dissension, or but sometimes it gets worrying on you too, so but
I remember. I mean,
you did your own group.
I ran that group for 5 years, and then asked Beth to take it over when I went to Rwanda.
Oh, okay.
And when I came back, I just said, you're doing such a good job, why don't you just keep going?
Yeah.
And she does a marvelous job. I think.
She does the Monday night groups. If anybody's interested, I know they're always looking for new members, and it's still Zoom, I think. So I don't think they meet in person anymore. And then she has kind of a Friday evening gathering where people, more of a social gathering, I think. Again.
Yeah.
So, but it's a good group.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, I want to back up then. You said you went to college. Where did you go to college, and what for?
So Colorado State, that's where my heart was. I was born in Colorado. We moved to Indiana. I was fortunate enough to get an academic scholarship that I could use that money. It wasn't restricted to a certain area or region. I could use it wherever I wanted to go to. And since my heart was in Colorado, I didn't pick an Ivy League school. I just went to a basic Colorado State, which was, agriculture school. But the challenge was for me, well, should I be a school teacher? Because that's what our family is, but we don't make much money. And I kind of was tired of being at that lower level of income. I always wanted to change the world. So you had poli-sci, but I was like, I don't know if I can really handle that either, And then I was good with numbers. Math was really easy for me. And you fill out those little postcards of what you're interested in. And I must have gone to some, fair, and I must have gotten something from Colorado, or maybe I, requested it and they mailed it to me. So I guess I checked business, and I got an acceptance to the business college. And I said, well, I guess that's where I'm going. So I joined it, and then they wanted to know what you wanted to learn, right? I guess what discipline. And I was like, oh man, accounting. It's just too many rules, And then when you memorize these rules, then there's all these like gray areas. I can't do accounting. And to me, marketing was like, oh, these are like, they're great people, but they're very social and they're very beautiful. And I didn't really have that in my personality. And then after year one, they said, you really have to decide. And so I just chose finance. And so that's what I went into, finance, because I could crunch my numbers. And it was a heavily men filled. There was probably out of, I don't know, 100 in our class, maybe a dozen women. But that just made logical sense. And then my first job when people came to interview was with Shell Oil. That's the one that I had a few, like Conoco and a few other oil companies. And the gentleman I was dating at the time, his father who was in the industry, said, you're not going to go wrong with Shell. So that's kind of why I chose Shell.
Yeah.
And that I started out in the LA Basin. So you take a Midwest girl who's been in Colorado, and now you throw her in the LA Basin. So that was interesting. You thought you made a lot of money until you paid your rent and car and food and school payments. So anyway, and then Shell transferred me to Houston. That's how I got to Houston. And Houston was a great town to live in. From there, I worked on my MBA, and an opportunity came to work with a small and uprising company called EOTT, Enron Oil Trading and Transportation. Worked for them for a couple years, and then, of course, that kind of imploded. I had left a year before it imploded, not knowing it was going to implode.
Wasn't your fault.
No, it wasn't my fault.
Okay.
But you were kidding a little bit before we started the interview. Oh, you must have a lot of money stocked away. But, I lost my Enron money, so that didn't happen. Because what they do is they give you employee option stock, right? And then if you don't get out of it soon enough because you naively think it's going to go back up, you lose it. So it's kind of like, but I was young enough to rebuild. When you get older, it's harder to rebuild. So
Yeah.
And then from there, I took a similar type of job, but out on the East Coast. I was kind of done with Houston at that time. And so that was National Energy Group, which was part of PG&E. And that was really cool. I really liked being in Bethesda and the access to D.C. and being able to get on the metro. And that's around the time I met Rob. And when that job dissolved, because a lot of things were changing with the landscape of oil and gas, kind of with Enron and some of the other majors. People were losing their bonds and bond grades, and so things were getting brought down with companies. So anyway, I left and got my severance, and that's when I went to massage school and settled over in the Delaware area for about 15 years. And then Rob, my husband, took a job here in Pittsburgh, and that's why I'm here.
So this work, and I guess we haven't introduced the audience to this yet, the idea that you started doing some television work on PCTV.
Yeah.
How did that come about, and what is it that you were doing?
Yeah. So coming from school teachers, I always wanted to educate people on massage. So lots of times people feel like massage is for the rich and famous, or only when you go on vacation or when you're injured. A lot of people don't realize you can keep up with it on a regular basis, and you can budget for it, just like you budget for going out to the movies or budget going out to dinner. But it's more than just, okay, I feel better. There's all kinds of different types of massages. So like prenatal, what is prenatal? What are the benefits? What are the contraindications? What is really trigger point massage? What is really Swedish massage? And so I was doing some networking when I first got here to Pittsburgh, and I met John, who was the director over at PCTV at the time. And the group was small enough, we had our a minute commercial so we all could talk about our businesses. And when he said he had this studio where you could go in and you could do your it had to be educational because it was nonprofit. I couldn't go in there and say, hey, everybody come and, get a massage from me, but I had to do something educational. And that took a while for me to figure out how to talk in an educational, but he helped me. As we were having our meetings, and they said, now, Joan, you're a producer. And I'm like, I don't know what that means, but they kind of educated me on that. And then you have to come up with a name for your show. And I was like, I don't know, but one of the staff there, she goes, how about just pathways to wellness? We kind of played on that for a
Yeah.
while because then it's so open and so broad. It doesn't have to be massage therapy. I could, eventually get to the point where I'd talk to somebody about aromatherapy or a chiropractor or a Tai Chi person or, whatever
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense in your wellness program, a nutritionalist. So, and I would try to do something monthly over there. And it was very affordable because it was community funded. And my first couple tapings, they were just really raw and really, kind of in my mind horrible. But eventually I went and retaped them. But I think the one reason I got subject matter was working with Beth and Joan with the ARE. We decided to do a wellness day, and I wanted to talk about self massage. And I had my Cayce Reilly routine that we learned, and I was like, how do I take that from me being a massage therapist so you can apply it to you as an individual and still be so you're not going to injure yourself, right? So
Yeah.
you're not going to go too deep and you know what your contraindications are or explain that to your audience. And so I took that and put that into a technique. And then I presented at one of the ARE wellness days we had a couple of years ago. And then I took that, and that was my first filming with PCTV. And since then, I've taken it and I've done it at La Roche University for the people there a couple times. Actually, tomorrow I'm going to do another modification of it with my pastor and her pastors because they're going into Holy Week. And so we're going to just do hands and feet. So I'm going to modify it a little bit so they know what they could do to help themselves with their
Yeah.
own self-care.
So at what church is that?
So that's a Lutheran church, Nativity Lutheran Church over in the North Hills. But and I don't know if it's just all Lutheran ministers or if it's just ministers in general, but I'll meet them tomorrow. So,
Yeah.
and I don't know how many well, I assume it's ladies, but it could be, it could be men too. So I'm not sure how many are in their group,
Yeah.
But that's what's really nice. Like at La Roche, it's senior lifelong learning. So it's people kind of 55 and older. And not everybody has the means or the funds to get to a massage therapist, right?
Yeah.
Not everybody can travel or they don't have it in their finances. So what can you do a little bit on your own to help with your own self-care?
Yeah.
But so I did about 13 filmings with PCTV, Pathways to Wellness, and we would just take different subjects. I would get different clients to come in to be my bodies, and just kind of have that interaction of how did trigger points help them, or how did Swedish help them, or how did cranial sacral help them. We did a Reiki one too, and I did it with a pendulum because that's easier for people to see
Right.
the energy movement. And then what I wanted to do was the next phase was do nutritionalists or a yoga person, take other people from the community in. And unfortunately, PCTV lost their funding late, I think in August or September.
Yeah.
So it closed down. So I haven't gone back doing anything yet.
Yeah.
But
So what's the deal with Altoona then? Because they're broadcasting some of your old shows?
yeah. Did I tell you that, or you just found that out?
Or
Yeah.
I did some research.
Okay. Yeah, so they came to me. I was very blessed with this. They came to me probably in November-ish and said, hey, we were looking at some of the programs that PCTV had, because they would put it out on their PCTV YouTube channel, just like what you do, right? And we got the permission with PCTV dissolving to let Altoona, I'm not saying that right, broadcast it. And so I think I haven't followed up with them since maybe December, January, but I think they're putting something out there. I don't know if it's weekly or once a month. I'm not sure what they're doing. I think it's Tuesday evenings. So,
Yeah.
but, and I said, yeah. And so I got a lawyer and I got somebody else to actually, John at PCTV, to write the language. So we make sure that whatever was being broadcast over there was correct. And when I say correct, legally, so there wasn't any ramifications, which I wouldn't know what those are, but I had the people that know that to make sure everybody was cool. And then with Pathways to Wellness too, I got the trademark registered and the word mark registered. So that came through in January, and I have an actual logo. And so I'm kind of on hold a little bit until I figure out what to go next direction with it. But
Yeah.
I'm trying to make a series with it outside of just the 13 I've already done. So,
Uh-huh.
but thanks for asking. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is just to let people know that there's more to massage than just laying on a table and just, you
Yeah.
know.
So I'm very curious because as a Reiki practitioner, I can do Reiki on myself.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you first learn Reiki, that's where you start. You do
That's
it on
right.
yourself. But massage on myself, I can't reach my back. How do you do that?
But there's more of your body than just your back, right?
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, we could just start, you know, just with your arms, right? You just kind of go up from your arms, go up to here.
Yeah.
And we kind of forget how soothing that is, right? Just doing something like that. And then
Close your eyes and pretend it's somebody else.
yeah. But you can use your own energy, you know?
Yeah.
So you could do both, both arms.
Uh,
And we forget, like my right arm, I'm feeling right now super tight. So maybe I was doing a lot of computer work and writing work. I wrote a bunch of thank you notes yesterday. So maybe that's why my right hand or right arm is a little bit tighter. But to do your back, you're right. I mean, you can only go to here. You can maybe go to mid back. But you can also do some twisting and some turning to get to some of that. But if you need something else, you can always get some tennis balls and a sock. And you can do that to kind of rub it,
Yeah.
right? And that gets pressure points. You can lay down on those tennis balls and move around. I had a massage educational class. That's what we did. We laid on the floor and we rolled around on tennis balls for our own self massage to get the own trigger points. There's these S hooks that you can take and you can go around your shoulder and you can do some of your own trigger point releases too. You can get a massage chair, the ones that vibrate, right?
Yeah.
And so
Sure.
that helps too. But when I do the self-massage routine, I think, I can't remember how many steps, maybe 13, but we go through all, what you can do on your face, what you can do on your head, your neck, your hands, your legs. Do a lot with your stomach. We digest a lot. And that's a big thing with Cayce. We talk about how you can move the colon and the different parts. When I say move the colon, doing the massage around the colon for your elimination. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's one I learned a while back, and part of my qigong routine includes that. It's very good for digestion.
Yeah. And see, that's what's so cool as you're doing this, whether it's Qigong, whether it's Reiki, whether it's, I know people do tapping, right? That's self-tapping stuff. There's so many ways that you can use self-care or just have someone else, do it for, pay for a service or trade for a service. But there's just so many techniques and so many cultures. So when I talk about the reflexology, we as Americans didn't develop it, right?
Right.
I mean, they've been doing it for centuries, over whether it was, the Asians or whether it was the Egyptians or whether, whatever culture, people were always rubbing feet. Yeah, us Americans, a lot of times we want to document, we want to have the science behind it, Europeans too. And so we might have some of it written down, documented that maybe some of the other cultures don't. But, as you're open to it, my only thing I say when you do self stuff, just make sure you don't have to go super deep. You can do stuff very mildly. When I say mildly, like medium touch, you don't have to beat yourself up. And also if you have contraindications, which I go over those on the filming, or I'm sure you can, talk to your own doctor. If you have any certain kind of ailments, like you have goat, whatever's that, gout, it's gout.
Gout.
Yeah. I didn't say that right. But you might have to avoid that in your feet if you have something like that, or some arthritis stuff going on. Or if you have, I'm trying to think of other things off the top of my head, but anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's quite a journey you've been on.
yeah, I enjoy it. Yeah, and it keeps changing. And I really have to give kudos to my husband because he's like, don't you want to go back, get a real job, make some real money? And I make okay money. I pay my bills, but I'm not, living extravagantly. He's the one that pays, the mortgage and the household bills. And
Yeah.
So, but I feel like when you give from your heart, stuff comes back to you, right? And so it doesn't necessarily have to be cash, it could be other energetic um, workings in the universe
Yeah.
that help other people and help yourself.
Well, plus it sounds like you're part of a team.
Yeah.
So he's enabling you to give this. And so part of what you're giving is for him too,
Yeah,
because he's back there supporting that. So,
that's true. And he'll come in every once in a while and get a massage or two. So,
okay. So there are different types of therapeutic massage, and you've thrown out some of the names of
mhm.
those things. Can you get into some of the subtle differences, or?
Yeah. So basically, what I've been trained and what I've seen over time, because just because I've had my own training doesn't mean every school trains the same way or every culture. Okay. So there's a Swedish massage. That's just the basic, very light massage. You're just trying to get the top surface stuff. You're trying to get circulation moving, lymphatics moving. It's just very soothing.
Mhm.
Now that's American Swedish, but if you're going over to European, Swedish is very fast paced. It's to warm everything up
Mm.
for athletic events and to like detox afterwards. So you have to depend, where you're at. Are you in the US or if you're over in Europe, that changes. Then the next one is going a little bit deeper now. This varies a lot. So you'll hear deep tissue massage. I don't technically do deep tissue massage. That can be into Rolfing, that can be into neuromuscular, that can just go, there's all kinds of type. And what you're doing is you're going deeper in the surface and trying to kind of break up some of that muscle integrity, depending on which technique you're doing. And there's a thought if you got a muscle knot, you're going to go into really deep and dig and dig and dig and get it out, right?
Yeah.
Whatever technique you're doing. So what I've learned over time, if you befriend that knot, and you kind of hold into that knot and you just allow it to kind of unwind and kind of like a lighter and then maybe a little bit deeper touch, then a little bit deeper. So you work at it in a little like layers.
Hmm.
That's kind of what I do as trigger point releases. So I hold into that. I try to figure out where that fascia is around it. The fascia is
Yeah.
a different connective tissue and muscle tissue. So that probably was what makes me a little bit different when I'm trying to find out what's going on with somebody. So someone comes in, they said, Joni, I've got this really bad neck pain. I feel it right in here. Well, I might actually feel it more in their shoulders, right?
Yeah.
Or it might be more
Right.
in their pecs or something. So, and you know that too from Reiki. So you kind of listen to them and you go to that area where they're hurting first so their mind relaxes. And then you figure out where you need to go. And it's like a jigsaw puzzle to me, or almost like a quilt. There's different layers that you go to, and the fibers can go different ways. And as long as you befriend those fibers, then they're going to relax and unwind. There's a fight and flight thing. So if you go super hard, super aggressive, super quick, then it's going to kind of back off from you, and
Mm.
you may not get to the source of it. You may not get to the unraveling of it. And people say, "Oh, I've had a deep tissue massage. I feel so amazing 2 days later, but they hurt like heck for the first couple
Yeah.
of days." Well, because of course you've been beaten up,
Yeah.
but did it get to the source? I don't know. So that's kind of what makes me a little bit different. The therapeutic, and I say therapeutic massage, and the reason I say this, it's really from my mother. When she started, was in the '90s, out in Colorado, in the town she was, there were brothels, right? So if you got a massage, you were getting a sexual massage. And so she had to change the mentality of society out there, of the people in the community, that it wasn't just a massage that was
Yeah.
sexual, it was therapeutic in nature. So she's always used the word therapeutic. So that makes people understand that you're getting a
Yeah.
massage for your therapeutic benefits. We've kind of, now 20, 30 years later, there's more people accepting massage and realizing it's more of a health. And
Right.
but back in the day when she was doing it, she actually had to go in front of their tiny little town council and getting her license, and people were just really mean to her, but she stuck her guns, and she used some of the Edgar Cayce stuff to kind of get through to them. So
Yeah.
anyway, but
Mm.
that's a therapeutic one. And then what else? I mean, like the Swedish massage. No, I'm not saying that right. The prenatal massage is what I wanted to say next. So you got a baby in you, right? And so I remember in school, a lot of people were like, I've already had babies. I know how to massage. Well, I personally hadn't had a baby. And I think there's more to it than just, being a mother than being a therapist for the mother. And
Yeah.
so I learned different techniques, what you want to do. You don't want to, again, go too hard on them because you got two systems and you got the baby system and you got the mother system. But there's things that you can do like for their edema. A lot of them get edema in their legs and
Right.
ankles. So you can work on, like detoxing that and using very light, strokes that helps work with the lymphatic drainage. And then and I'm going this way, but you really want to move up towards wherever the drainage points are, and you want to make sure those drainage points are released, which is usually here for legs and here for upper body. But and then you've got cranial sacral, which is just trying to work with that cerebral spinal fluid that goes through the spinal column from the cranium down to the sacrum. That's what I really enjoyed receiving in massage school. I had a lot of trauma from different car accidents or just roughhousing, and all that trauma somehow, physical trauma, brute force trauma, can get stuck in your muscle tissue. There's another thing called zero balancing, which is working with the bone energy, which I got exposed to that about 10 years ago. And just that's fabulous, understanding everything that can get stuck in the bone. In addition to like the fascia, the tissues, the nervous system. So as you learn more and more, I'm starting to get people wanting me to do more oncology massage. So I'm going to brush up my skills on that. It's been a while since I've taken an oncology class, probably like 2012-ish. So,
Yeah.
Probably a lot's changed in the last decade. So I want to learn what they're now saying about it. But when I first started, or even before we first started, they said you couldn't have massage because you were spreading cancer through the body. So they have now said, no, that's not the case. And lots of times just relaxing the people that are receiving their treatments or, trying to get through their different challenges. There's a way to help with that drainage. Again, going into healthy lymph nodes, if lymph nodes have been removed for any of their cancer treatments. And so there's a whole protocol with that too. So.
Yeah. So you mentioned reflexology, and I was curious to know if you do any of that, because when you talked about, the pain in the neck, and is it really in the shoulder or maybe in the pecs?
Yeah.
Maybe reflexology is gonna do that.
So I have a cute story about reflexology. So, on the bottom of your feet, there's like a map of what everything is. I need to buy the socks that have the map so you can put them on the bottom. I always forget about that. But there's charts, right? And so I was asked to do reflexology at a wellness fair. The person that was doing the chair massages, they already had that. I was like, oh, great. So I went and brushed up on my notes, right, on how to do the foot massages. And I'm practicing on my foot that night. And I was talking to my mom, and Mom was like, Joan, you really need to take this reflexology stuff seriously, And I was like, oh, Mom, it's just rubbing feet, And she's a massage therapist too. She has her own school.
Yeah.
So I'm doing it. I'm practicing. Well, kind of in the middle of your foot, there's the bladder. And so I was working that area. For whatever reason, it seemed a little like, tough in that area, congested.
Yeah.
I had to get up and pee 3 times that night. So there is some like validity to it. But and I'd have to double check on the chart, but usually your neck is on the pinky side. So whether it's the pinky here or the pinky of your toe. And as you're working that, and you might find some congestion in there. And as you're working that might help with getting up to that neck part. Then step of your foot is mirrors your back, your spine. So you can't get to maybe your mid back. So maybe you rub the instep of your foot kind of in the middle, and that might help with that reflexology. Another thing that I like to do, if you can't physically touch it, and I'm sure this is like your mindset too, you can just take a moment and feel your muscles there in kind of, I want to say, a meditative state, and just tell them to relax and tell them to
Hmm.
unwind. You can actually talk to your body and have that do that.
Yeah, and to breathe into it is really helpful.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So I've personally done that if I can't reach certain things on my body, and I try to tell my clients they can do that too. When they're, you know, resting at night, whether they've just laid down to go to sleep or they're in their chair, if they're just knitting or if they're watching some TV, you can take control of your own body. You can rekindle your own spirit. You don't have to someone else always
Right.
doing that for you. So,
Yeah, I'm working with somebody right now who's got a phantom limb,
oh wow,
and she feels burning in her foot, and it's very painful. But the foot it's gone.
oh wow,
She had the leg amputated from the
yeah,
knee down. So we're working on the cells that are there
yeah,
to say, that you don't need to send energy to that spot anymore. It's not there. So just relax
yeah,
and you try to get the person to breathe into those cells and just relax them.
yeah.
But
Is it helping a little bit or?
we'll find out. This has
Okay.
just started.
It just
So,
started, yeah.
yeah.
Well, a lot of it is just you're a coach. You're teaching them to think a little bit differently, and as they start putting that into their practice,
Yeah.
and when they feel it. So I'm going to tell you another little thing. So I broke my ankle when I was in the 90s, and I was still corporate America, and I was in a serious car accident. And I had plates and screws in there. So my mom came and she was, new with all this stuff, massage, and she doesn't really do Reiki, but she does a lot of that energy type healing.
Hmm.
She works with angels. That's kind of what she does. But she told me, and I guess kind of referral stuff, she told me, like, right in here, Joni, you just do this when you're sitting there and you're in pain, like in a not board meeting, but, regular meeting at work. Just do that because I can't lean down in a skirt and start,
Uh-huh.
massaging my leg, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's still there, but it's in a lot of pain and it's in a cast. And so I started learning a little bit, like what you're saying, is some of that cellular referral to try to help relax it and realize
Hmm.
that it's, you know, it can heal on its own. She put her
Yeah.
hands over my cast and I felt it bubbling. I was like, oh, this is really crazy.
Well, you have 10 billion cells in your body, and they
Well,
all communicate with each other all the time.
see, that makes sense then, right?
So if you can help them communicate in a way that's helpful to other cells,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're in good shape.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm loving this conversation. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we covered everything that I had in my notes.
I appreciate you being so thorough.
Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy your busy schedule. So I guess one of my thoughts was that there is typically a point at which somebody flicks the switch and says, okay, this makes sense now. So you're in massage school, you're learning the physical pieces, you're getting all this spiritual stuff thrown at you, which originally it sounds like you balked at that and said, what's that have to do with anything?
Yeah, I agree. Yep.
What was it that allowed you to flip that switch and say, oh, yeah, this does make sense?
I remember I had one practicum. So we were practicing on people. We had to do like 20 after we had learned the whole massage.
Yeah, believe me, I've gone down to the ARE
And you've been the
to a
body?
conference and gone over to say, here I am, practice on me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you're practicing on people, right? And
Yeah.
you're nervous, you're not sure what you're really doing. But I was getting feedback from some of the staff. And so I can't really pinpoint it other than that I was getting, wow, your hands are really good. Wow, I feel more than just mechanics out of your hands. I felt the heat out of your hands.
Uh-huh.
And that was coming from staff, so not just somebody, that was a community member. And okay, so maybe my ego got up a little bit, but then I was like, I really don't know what I'm doing. And but at least gave me some warm and fuzzies. And I
Mm-hmm.
think too, what also helped my confidence, because remember I had to 180, right,
Yeah.
versus pushing paper and yelling at people and being very logical. But I had a lot of discussions with my mom, and my mom and I were not close. I was not close at all with my mom growing up. I was closer to my dad. So we started to being able to have something in common, and she did a lot of listening and a lot
Yeah.
of kind of guidance and maybe challenging. So I had a good support system, you know.
Uh-huh.
And then when I went back to Delaware, I opened up the newspaper. We still had them then, and I was looking for a job, right? I figured I was going to go to a bank and do my financial stuff. And one of Rob's coworkers said she, was at the spa and she was telling her beautician about me and they had an opening. And I was like, oh man, I don't think I'm spa material. But I said, okay, I'll backdoor it and I'll go in and I'll get a haircut and I'll talk to her beautician. So as we're talking, and I'm kind of telling her a little bit of a story how I got started and all that, but it seemed like she was more in charge than just being a beautician. And I finally said, well, how are you involved here? She goes, yeah, I own it. so, and so I didn't realize,
Yeah.
my friend Claire had put me in with not only her beautician, but the owner. And so this was like June-ish, July-ish. And she goes, well, we're going to have an opening in October. And I was like, October? That's like forever. But I still had to sit for my boards. I still had to get my license. And I said, okay, what the heck? And I was real nervous there, but I just was getting people in a very comfortable, non-judgmental environment to work on, right? People
Mm-hmm.
just wanted relaxed. And then I slowly got into a chiropractor's office and I started doing more injury type stuff. And I think what the aha moments are is when you see people get off that table and they feel relaxed or they genuinely tell you how much better they feel. Or
Yeah.
if it's a chiropractor situation, they come back for 2 or 3 sessions because it's prescribed to them and you can see their body changing and their attitude changing. And so then that's kind of like, all right, I can handle this. And I was still I still need to make money. So I was still pretty trying to make income back then, but also giving from my heart. Since COVID, demand kind of was off for a little bit. And then I had to rebuild my book here in Pittsburgh. So my income levels aren't like what I had in Delaware, but they're coming back. So,
Yeah.
yeah, you get situated with the right people and the right people. I say the right people, but the people that need to find you and need your help will be on your table. So,
Yeah. Well, we're about out of time.
okay. Thank you.
And what I do at the end of every broadcast is to invite the guest to leave our audience with a few words of wisdom.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know how challenging that feels for you, but
Well, I guess my words of wisdom would be as you go through day-to-day life, take time for yourself. Whatever that means for you. Take a breath. Massage your hands. Massage if you want to, your shoulders, your legs, your knees. Take time for yourself and just make sure you are well from within. If you need your spirit rekindled, start with yourself doing it. But if you need somebody else, like Bob as a Reiki person, or myself, or there's so many people in the community that can help you. But just take time for you.
okay.
Thanks.
Well, audience, as always, take what you've heard, incorporate what resonates with you into your life, put the rest on a shelf until you're ready to deal with it. And until next time, this has been your spiritual journey.